Right, yeah, guys. So I'll be doing these videos kind of fresh, similar to the ones we've done on Booster. However, I'll try to add little bits here and there. Um, right, so Elizabeth. Now we're going to start right at the beginning here. So you need to know a little bit about the context, a little bit about what the Elizabethan world's like. So average life expectancy is relatively low. This is normally because of the amount of births that are failed, or youngsters who are dying early on because of the lack of healthcare. We know that from medicine through time. Um, Now, Elizabeth, she's 25 when she becomes queen. Make sure you know the date. It's 1558. And this is kind of how society looks: nobility at the top, and then the gentry, then the yeomanry, and then you get the tenant farmers who will become important in key topic 3. And then you've got the landless and labouring poor and the vagrants. So that's how society is structured: the rich at the top, poor at the bottom. Again, that's more important for our final key topic. And in the city, it's a little bit different because you've got the merchants. It's about wealth. You've got the merchants, the professionals, etc. So it's a little bit about what Elizabethan society is like. Now, guys, you need to know what the Elizabethan court is. Okay, quite often can be a feature. I would be surprised if it was an explained question, but just because there's not loads of detail on it. However, again, try and remember a couple of things about each part of the court. So, each part of the government. So you got the court. If you ever watch any of these period shows, the court is where you get the ladies, the nobles. They all come and meet. Now, Robert Dudley's, an example of a courtier. Robert Dudley being the Earl of Leicester, and their role is really to advise the Queen and to entertain. So you've got a diplomat. So say a foreign party comes, you're kind of showing off. You're kind of entertaining foreign guests. And they get influence. So the court, they try to get close to the Queen. The closer they get, they can push the Queen towards her agenda. Again, this is one of the reasons why the Northern Earls revolt. The Northern Earls are frustrated with the lack of Catholic influence at court. Your Privy Council probably is one of the most important ones. Probably is the one you've heard the most because Cecil is a Privy Councillor. Now, Cecil, remember, he's one of the leading advisors to Elizabeth. Now, he is important in the lead up to the first and second plots. Now, the Privy Council, they debate the issues, they maintain law and order, and they advise the monarch. They're very important for advising the monarch. And the way the Privy Council comes up is really to do with Mary Queen of Scots, because remember, like Cecil and his mates, they really want Elizabeth to execute Mary, but Elizabeth keeps refusing. So the Privy Council, very important part of the government, very important to kind of advising and keeping Elizabeth level-headed. Parliament, I mean, this one should be pretty straightforward, especially those who do citizenship. They don't have as much power as they do today, but Parliament plays a significant role because if Elizabeth needs to raise if Elizabeth needs to raise money, she needs to go to Parliament, and Parliament have to raise tax for her. Okay, that's significant. And again, advice. They advise the Queen. Right, the Lords Lieutenants probably is less familiar with these guys. You probably won't remember this guy, but their main role is to raise and train the militia. So think of them as almost like a defence force. Again, they support the local government and the Justices of the Peace. So this is one you may be more familiar with because of their involvement in the poor laws. So their role is social and economic issues. They carry out court cases in local government. Remember, they're the ones who collect in the poor relief when we get to the vagabondage in our third topic. Okay, so that earlier part is just make sure you don't neglect it. It could easily pop up as a feature, but remember, there's 2 different features these days, so it might be easier. But first big question is problems facing Elizabeth. Now, a little bit of background, and it is linked to the problems, especially in her early reign. You know, you've got Henry VIII, Edward VI, Lady Jane Grey, Mary, and then Elizabeth, and really religion is swinging back and forth. So people are very worried about what steps Elizabeth's going to take. Just that graphic on the previous page, you know, be aware that like Edward was Protestant, Mary was Catholic, and Elizabeth is going to find that middle way. So yeah, it is surprising that Elizabeth becomes queen, especially, you know, when Henry VIII dies. Elizabeth's well down the pecking order, and very importantly, her mum was executed, and Elizabeth was deemed illegitimate. So again, that's going to have a big problem. You know, when her brother and her sister have to die before Elizabeth gets the throne, and you know, many people didn't think a woman ruling was natural. They felt this was completely against the normality of Elizabethan, of that period. You know, in a marriage, the woman would be property of the man. So yeah, Elizabeth's not going to be looked upon as a natural ruler, at least not immediately. So she inherits these religious divisions from her brother and her sister. She faces the plots that we'll get to, and she faces the challenges from abroad. But she is quite a formidable individual. She is very clever, well educated. She understands politics. She speaks multiple languages, and this is, you know, when we look at her foreign policy, we look at how she deals with the French and the Spanish, for instance, using her virginity and a single nature, singlehood to not manipulate, but influence foreign princes. It's very clever. She's confident. She does great speeches. She does have a temper like her father, and she weighs up decisions. We know this from certainly Mary Queen of Scots, and how when she didn't execute straight away. So problem number one. So the way this will come to it, if you've got an explain question, 3 paragraphs, 3 points, or a 16 marker, which one's the biggest problem? Legitimacy for me, again, don't let me influence you, but you know, you need to argue yourself. But legitimacy is one of the biggest problems, because this means her position can be challenged. Remember, her mother was executed, and Elizabeth and Mary, that's Mary Tudor, were delegitimized. Now, so that puts a question mark straight away. But more significantly is Catholics don't accept Anne Boleyn's marriage to Henry. So even though Henry puts Elizabeth back in line to the throne, you know, so he legitimizes her again, Catholics still don't accept it, purely because they never accepted Anne Boleyn's marriage to Henry. So therefore she's seen as a bastard in their eyes, and Catholics will always look for an alternative, which will be important with Mary Queen of Scots. So that's going to be a bone of contention, and you can use that in your answers. You can kind of link that and say, look, I know this is the biggest problem, because I know, you know, Elizabeth faces 4 plots because of this legitimacy issue. If the legitimacy wasn't an issue, then maybe these plots wouldn't have happened. Right, gender, again, quite simply, she's a woman. Women weren't seen as natural rulers. It was unusual. Christianity kind of suggested men should be superior, women secondary. And monarchs were expected to lead in battle, and women didn't tend to lead armies. They were seen as mentally, physically, or emotionally incapable of ruling. You know, and men were, and even in marriage, you know, Elizabeth would then be second to her husband, so who would really rule? So gender is going to be an issue, and also make sure you're aware of how her sister, with Bloody Mary, was seen unfairly, maybe. Her sister was seen as a poor ruler, and that Elizabeth would just be more of the same. So Mary Tudor was the first queen, and she'd lost Calais to France. This was a big problem because humiliating. Also, Mary Tudor had been married to Philip II, and Philip had used England basically in his wars. So people were very angry at this, and again added that bone of tension when Elizabeth becomes queen. So England becomes massively in debt. Mary's marriage to Philip was very popular, and again it puts these question marks in place for who is Elizabeth going to marry. And marriage being another problem. And remember, guys, if you're faced with this in the exam, you can combine a lot of these problems. Like, I think marriage fits nicely to woman to gender. I think I'll probably combine those two. But Elizabeth never does marry, purely because I think she wants to stay away from those risks of potentially being seen as secondary towards her husband. And she always says she's married to England. And she uses the fact that she wasn't married very cleverly throughout her reign. She's able to, like I've said before, use people like the Duke of Alençon to her advantage. But again, the disadvantages is she lacks an heir. You need a marriage to have an heir. And while she's not married, there's always that question mark. So you can link the lack of marriage to, again, the plots, because, Elizabeth doesn't have an heir. So her rule can be challenged. Again, she does turn down several offers, again from Philip II, who was her brother-in-law. Don't put too much weight on this for the reason for the Armada. This is like 30 years before the Armada set sail, but she refuses marriage to Philip II. Religion is always going to be a big problem, purely because of Edward being the Protestant, Mary being the Catholic. Now, threats from home and abroad. Again, you've got the financial problems. Again, you can link this back to gender as well, because a lot of this can be blamed on Mary Tudor for fighting these wars in France, and Henry VIII, to be honest. They're about £300,000 in debt. Now, the only way to raise money is through rents and income, taxation through Parliament. You've got Justices of the Peace fining people. Loans is also potential. So 300,000 in debt when the annual income was only 286. So again, it highlights the problem. But like I said, if you ever face this question, think about how you're going to answer it. I think debt, again, I'd probably link with another problem. I think for me, I would focus on gender and marriage as one. I'd definitely do religion, and then I'd probably do legitimacy. Those would be my three, to be honest. And the rest you can kind of link in. So think of it that way. Remember, you're like these big questions. You're only, the max. You're only doing 3 paragraphs and then a judgment, or just 3 straight paragraphs. So think about that when you are looking at these factors. Europe, it's useful to be aware of what the state of Europe is like. You got France, the big powerful country in the middle. Mary Queen of Scots is there, married to their prince, which is going to be a problem. So France, big Catholic power. Spain, the other big Catholic power. They're seen as the leaders of the Catholic religion. Scotland, which is independent and Catholic when we start our period. But like I said in class, that kind of changes when Elizabeth kind of gets involved with the Scottish Protestant lords. And England, so it's faced with challenges everywhere. And Scotland and France are kind of linked with this old alliance. And that's only strengthened with Mary Queen of Scots married to the French prince. Remember, Mary's mother, Mary of Guise, is sitting in Scotland at the outset of our period. France and Spain, so they aren't at war, but they're great rivals. They're like dueling and battling out for the supremacy of Europe. Now, remember, Elizabeth's quite clever with, navigating that conflict. So keep that in mind in terms of foreign policy. France itself, long-time enemy. Calais had been taken off England during the reign of Mary Tudor. So Mary Tudor lost it, again, emphasising how women aren't a good aren't good rulers, at least in the minds of the people, because Mary had lost Calais. Elizabeth kind of promises to get this back. She sees it as a big part of her foreign policy. I mean, it doesn't happen, but she does really want to get it back. It was useful for trade, Calais, and a very important military post. So it was a huge loss to the people, and that posed a real big problem. For Elizabeth. Right, Mary Queen of Scots. So again, I'll be focusing on this a little bit more in another video. But Mary Queen of Scots, that this constant thorn in Elizabeth's side. And remember, as I said in class, Elizabeth is sympathetic though to Mary because she's another female ruler, she's part of the family. Now, Mary, she has a strong claim to the English throne. She comes from the female line, but her legitimacy is not questioned, and she's Catholic. Okay, really remember those 2 points. Okay, now she's got the links to France through her mother and her marriage. And Mary of Guise is ruling at the time. Mary actually becomes Queen of France for a little while, but then her husband dies. But again, significant threat because whilst there is a Catholic alternative, Elizabeth's position can be challenged. And again, we know that from the plot. Right, I've left that slide on just so I know when we're finishing. Please drop me emails with any questions, but as always, hopefully you find that quite useful.